Chapter 169. Why are you wasting your breath on him? Kill him and leave quickly. This is not a place where there are no people. While they were talking, someone on the other side had already shouted impatiently, and then a figure had already pounced forward. His movement almost immediately triggered everyone's action. The figure's flying sword was like a swarm of locusts pouncing on Yang Chen. Yang Chen stood in the same place, waving the ghost head blade, which in the eyes of others was extremely crude. With a move that could split Mount Hua, he chopped down in front of him with the same crude move. At the same time, Yang Chen's face also showed a smile as if his wish had been fulfilled, which made the people who besieged him look unhappy. The guy who made the first move was right in front of Yang Chen, his figure closely following the flying sword. His face was full of disdain, as if he wanted to kill Yang Chen with a sword. The ghost head blade chopped down from the top of his head. The opponent did not dodge, but just raised the flying sword. In his imagination, Yang Chen was a junior who had just reached the foundation establishment stage. Even if he was rewarded with a flying sword by Wuxia, he probably would not be able to use it skillfully. Moreover, the ghost head blade in Yang Chen's hand obviously did not look like a magic weapon. With just one slash, Yang Chen could be cut in half. His imagination was too beautiful, and it was easy for people to get lost. However, the reality was that Yang Chen's blade chopped down with the momentum of 1,000 caddies. Together with the flying sword, the opponent's figure was uniformly cut into 4 pieces. The people who were rushing up were all stunned. Their companion was cut in half by a blade. This strong visual shock made everyone involuntarily stop what they were doing. How was this possible? Although that friend was not an expert at the peak of the foundation establishment stage, he was already at the advanced stage of the foundation establishment stage. He had been in the foundation establishment stage for decades. Compared to a rookie like Yang Chen who had just entered the foundation establishment stage, his cultivation level could only be higher, and his magic weapon could only be stronger, not weaker. How could this be the result? The ghost head blade in Yang Chen's hand, what was it? Could it be that Yang Chen had refined it into a magic weapon? Even so, it couldn't possibly be comparable to the flying sword that was refined by the fellow Daoist who was killed for decades, right? However, the scene in front of them completely subverted their understanding. What was going on? The leader was even more terrified. How could this be? A few years ago, he had chased Yang Chen into the magma lake like a stray dog, not even daring to show his head. How long had it been since then? How could Yang Chen kill a powerful friend face to face? Damn you! After a short moment of silence, a loud roar rang out and another person rushed over like a madman. The flying sword was even faster than a human. It directly stabbed towards Yang Chen's heart. Ding, ding, ding. A series of crisp sounds rang out. It was Yang Chen holding the demon head saber horizontally in front of him. The wide surface of the saber directly blocked the onslaught of several flying swords. Although the flying sword stabbed at him in a hurry, it didn't leave a single mark on the demon head saber. However, the series of sounds made everyone's eyes light up. The demon head saber was also a magic weapon. Moreover, it was a magic weapon of good quality. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to break their friend's flying sword, let alone block this attack. In an instant, everyone's eyes lit up. The leader only wanted the pill prescriptions and medical scriptures on Yang Chen's body. He didn't want anything else. Naturally, the flying sword would go to the many helpers. Although there would be casualties, who would care about snatching food from the tiger's mouth? After the initial shock, the most they could do was to be a little more careful. The owner of the flying sword, the medical scriptures, flew close to Yang Chen. He stretched out both his fists and punched towards Yang Chen. The flying sword was still flying around Yang Chen, forcing Yang Chen to be unable to deal with it. Yang Chen snorted coldly. He clenched his empty left hand into a fist and punched towards his opponent's fist. Boom! The two fists collided, and a loud explosion rang out. A stream of yin-yang 5 elements spiritual energy was transferred from Yang Chen's fist to his opponent's fist. Immediately, this stream of spiritual energy, which had fused with the yin-yang 5 elements formation, madly drilled into his opponent's body. Not only that, when their fists collided, Yang Chen's fist was like a hammer, directly breaking 5 of his opponent's finger bones. A blood-curdling scream came from his opponent's mouth. Not only that, but what shocked his opponent the most was that Yang Chen's spiritual energy was overbearing. It carried an unstoppable momentum as it drilled into his fist and rushed up his arm. As for his fist, it was already making a series of cracking sounds. Because of the destruction caused by this spiritual energy, not only the finger bones of his entire fist were broken, but all the bones were broken. The spiritual energy did not stop there. It directly flowed up his opponent's arm. No matter how the opponent resisted, in front of the spiritual energy of the yin-yang 5 elements formation, it was simply useless. Yang Chen's spiritual energy was almost the purest of highly condensed power. Compared to these guys who had been in the foundation establishment stage for a long time, it was at least a few levels higher. Coupled with the amplification of the formation, the opponent's resistance was meaningless. Crack, crack. The sound of bones breaking came from his arm and directly spread to his shoulder. The guy who attacked almost never stopped screaming. He was so distracted that he did not even notice when his flying sword was collected by Yang Chen's sword box. However, his divine sense was suddenly cut off and his life-bonded magic weapon was taken away. It could not be concealed in any way. Under the great shock, the other party only thought that his flying sword was destroyed by Yang Chen. He was distressed, but the pain in his body became more and more intense. The spiritual energy that drilled into his shoulder did not stop at all. The scapula had already creaked and was about to break. The leader next to him was shocked. He directly reached out and put his hand on his back. The pure spiritual power of the peak foundation stage rushed directly into the opponent's body and began to resist Yang Chen's spiritual power together. His spiritual power is born from the 5 elements. It is endless. After such a long time of damage, the unlucky guy basically had a little understanding of Yang Chen's spiritual power. He hurriedly shouted, fearing that the leader would take a detour and he would be the one injured. The 5 elements are born from each other. The leader was stunned. He didn't know how Yang Chen did it, but he began to fight back against this. As long as one of Yang Chen's spiritual power was consumed, the entire spiritual power would be cut off. The idea was very correct, but when his spiritual power came into contact with Yang Chen's spiritual power alone, he suddenly found that there seemed to be an unfathomable force in the spiritual power alone, which directly smashed his defensive spiritual power and slammed forward. Crack! The first guy who was punched, his scapula made a heart-palpitating sound and turned into pieces. The attacking spiritual power did not stop and rushed straight to the heart meridian. The leader shouted and was about to explode. Suddenly, a blood-red thought rushed directly into his body from his companion's body and went straight into his sea of consciousness. Chapter 170. Hiss. In an instant, a strong killing intent drowned the leader's consciousness. There was nothing else in his mind except for the crazy killing intent that made people tremble. Who sent you here? A voice like that of the ruler of hell sounded in the leader's ear. Hearing this voice, the leader couldn't help but tremble. It's Li Daoist from Taishanmen. The leader didn't even know that he had said this. He only knew that under the pressure of the terrifying killing intent, he told everything he knew. Die. Now that he knew who it was, Yang Chen had no interest in keeping him alive. With a light shout, the 2 people who were connected suddenly exploded into pieces. The surrounding people were shocked. Just now, Yang Chen had just bombarded the fist of one of his companions, and they saw a series of fragmentation of his arm. With the help of the leader, it was still a series of bursts, and then the 2 people were turned into fragments at the same time. How could this not be terrifying? What kind of demonic method did you use? A guy who had once chased after Yang Chen shouted in horror, "Demonic demon, everyone has the right to kill you." In his opinion, it was difficult for a guy who had just reached the foundation establishment stage to fight against him, let alone block the siege of so many people. There was no other explanation except for demonic methods. Noisy! Yang Chen snorted coldly and turned to face the guy. A touch of blood red in his eyes had not dissipated, making him look like a demon god. A few people a little further away saw that the leader with the highest cultivation had exploded. Seeing that the situation was not good, they turned around and fled. They didn't even have time to take back their flying sword. Want to run? Not so easy. It was not easy to wait for these people to gather together. How could Yang Chen allow these people to escape? With a thought, the guardian formation of the herb garden was immediately activated. Originally, when he was being chased in the immortal fall abyss, Yang Chen was worried about Wuxia. He was afraid that something would be discovered in the immortal fall abyss, so he had not used it. But now, he had no such scruples. Yang Chen had succeeded in reaching the foundation establishment stage. Whether it was the spiritual power or the spiritual awareness he could use, it was far more than before. Moreover, the purified bottle of the medicine garden had already absorbed the spiritual power, so there was no need to worry about the backfire caused by using the protective array of the medicine garden. At most, it could only be used, but it could not be commanded according to his will. The medicine garden's grand array instantly enveloped a radius of several thousand feet. The group of fellows besieging Yang Chen suddenly discovered that they had suddenly appeared in a huge domed palace. While he was puzzled, his companions, who were running for their lives, suddenly let out a series of screams. Before they could see what was happening, they had already turned into a mess of broken pieces. This scene frightened everyone to the point that their souls almost left their bodies, and they hurriedly summoned their strongest protective magic treasures. A few of them had just taken 2 steps in the other direction when they felt a sharp pain in their bodies. Their entire body was drained of strength, and in the blink of an eye, they saw their own dismembered corpses. The rest of them didn't dare to act rashly anymore. They just stood there blankly, not daring to move at all. Their horrified eyes stared closely at the figure of Yang Chen, who was walking slowly over. The previous punch had fully verified how powerful his spiritual power was under the blessing of the Yin-Yang 5 elements formation and the Earth-Evil Polaris formation, so these people had no value to stay. If he fought with them, he would not delay Yang Chen's return to the Chunyang Palace to be apprenticed to the master. It was better to end the battle quickly. Whoever moves will die. In the threatening voice, Yang Chen slowly walked to the remaining guys and stretched out his hand. What about you? You all have the compass to track my Qingkuan bag. Who ordered it? A few people were stunned, and immediately a smart person took out the tracking compass from the Qingkuan bag and sent it to Yang Chen's hand. A few people didn't have it. They were originally invited by these people to help, so they didn't get these compasses. It's also fellow Li from the Taishanmen, but these compasses were provided by fellow Chu Hung of your sect. At this time, everyone knew that they were meat on the chopping block, and it was meaningless to resist stubbornly. There was no other way but to die meaninglessly. For Chu Heng, no one was a fool. Everyone just got benefits and did things. Who would be so loyal? Moreover, Chu Heng only said that Yang Chen was a junior in the qi refining realm, so it was not appropriate for him to kill him directly, so he just borrowed their hands. Who knew that this junior was so powerful that he could kill so many masters in a row? This was not borrowing their hands to kill Yang Chen. It was clearly borrowing Yang Chen's hands to kill them. Bang 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 bang. The 4 guys who took out the compasses were knocked out by Yang Chen with 1 punch, and then a series of restrictions were directly placed on them. After their 6 senses were sealed, they were directly thrown into the herb garden. As for the rest of the guys who came to help, Yang Chen did not care about them at all. Using his will, the flying sword above his head directly flew down and chopped them into pieces, leaving only Qingkuan bags behind. Those who stayed could help Yang Chen testify against Chu Heng, so they could die in the future. As for these people who came to help, since they had the idea of killing Yang Chen before, Yang Chen would not let them stay. Finally, another matter was settled, and Yang Chen's heart seemed to be relaxed again. After the relaxation, there was a burst of expectation. Now that he had successfully built his foundation, he could join the inner mountain gate when he returned to Chunyang Palace and see his master, whom he had not seen since his rebirth. At the thought of this, Yang Chen's whole body became hot, and he wished he could be in Chunyang Palace right now. The bamboo eagle's flying speed was too slow. Compared with Yang Chen's current escape technique, it was already somewhat slow. Along the way, Yang Chen used the escape technique to hurry, and basically did not appear to see anyone. He dared to go to Chunyang Palace with all his strength. This direction seemed to pass through a place that Yang Chen was familiar with. The first old mountain god who was beheaded by Yang Chen, his mountain god temple was in this direction. At that time, the old mountain god said that he also left a batch of spirit stones there, so he couldn't let Yang Lan and the others take advantage of it. Yang Chen just rushed over there. At that time, the old mountain god only said that he had left a few kilograms of spirit stones in front of his altar. Knowing that the old mountain god had been very poor, Yang Chen did not expect to get rich from him. However, since it was something left for him, and the old mountain god had already made a deal with Yang Chen before he died, Yang Chen naturally would not want what belonged to him, and he could take these spirit stones with a clear conscience. However, when Yang Chen really stood in the mountain god temple and dug up the front of the altar, revealing the box containing the spirit stones, Yang Chen couldn't help but exclaim. Chapter 171. The dilapidated mountain god temple, the collapsed statue, the broken walls, only the outline was left, all kinds of vines were overgrown, and spider silk was everywhere. It was difficult to associate such a place with treasures and wealth. Perhaps it was for this reason that the old ancestor of the Yang family hid the treasures here as the capital for a comeback, and it rarely aroused people's doubts. The locust tree that Yang Chen dug up the treasures and planted had grown into a big tree. More than 10 years was enough for it to grow lush and green. The old mountain god's frustration at the time of his death made people have no doubt that he was telling the truth when he said that there were only a few kilograms of spirit stones. In this regard, Yang Chen was also convinced. However, to arrange a spirit-locking formation for a few kilograms of spirit stones seemed to be a bit of a fuss. Of course, Yang Chen could still understand that this was to prevent the leakage of spiritual power. On the one hand, it was to maintain the quality of the spirit stones, on the other hand, it was normal to be discovered. If it weren't for Yang Chen's firm belief that the old mountain god would not lie, if it weren't for Yang Chen's keenness to discover this spirit-locking formation, it would have been impossible to break the camouflage and find the box buried below. Although the old mountain god seemed to bury things in front of the stone platform casually, if one didn't know, it would be impossible to find these. A broken wooden box, like an ordinary mahogany box in the human world. After opening, there was a small metal box inside, heavy, but also full of rust, and it was about to rust. When it was opened again, there were a few kilograms of spirit stones shining. The spirit stones were indeed a few kilograms, but the value of a few kilograms of low-grade spirit stones and a few kilograms of top-grade spirit stones was 1,000,000 times different. Inside the box were 9 top-grade spirit stones shining with the brilliance of top-grade spirit stones. Each spirit stone was of the same size and shape. They were neatly stacked in the middle of the metal box. It was a breathtaking sight. These were the few kilograms of spirit stones left by the poor old mountain god? Yang Chen almost cursed out loud. Originally, after the old mountain god had said it, he did not take it to heart. It was just a few kilograms of spirit stones. Yang Chen did not care about it. If it weren't for the fact that he happened to pass by this direction, Yang Chen didn't know if he would have picked up this batch of spirit stones. 1 gene of top-grade spirit stones was equivalent to 100 gene of upper-grade spirit stones. 1 gene of upper-grade spirit stones was equivalent to 100 gene of middle-grade spirit stones, and 1 gene of middle-grade spirit stones was equivalent to 100 gene of lower-grade spirit stones. The 9 gene of top-grade spirit stones in the box was equivalent to 9 million gene of lower-grade spirit stones. 9 million kilograms of low-grade spirit stones could almost buy a medium-sized sect. Was this what the old mountain god meant by being poor and dejected? If this was considered as poverty, then all the net worth of Yang Chen's previous life would not necessarily add up to this number. Then what was it? Beggars? Not knowing whether to laugh or cry, Yang Chen picked up the 9 best quality spirit stones and was about to put them into the merit ring. Suddenly, he thought of something, picked up the metal box and began to ponder. The box was very heavy, far higher than the weight of the spirit stones. Before, Yang Chen didn't pay attention to it. Now that he held it in his hand, he found that the box was not ordinary. Under the obvious rust, there was a clear trace of light. After a careful look, Xianxia almost raised his head and scolded the old mountain god. Even the metal box containing the spirit stones was made of cyan crystal profound gold. This was a top-grade refining material that could only be found by luck, but not by searching for it. Yet, it was actually turned into such a broken box by him. If he was not careful and only cared about those top-grade spirit stones, he would definitely end up in a scene of buying the casket and returning the pearls. This cyan crystal profound gold could be exchanged for 10 times the best quality spirit stones of the same weight. Just these dozens of kilograms of cyan crystal profound gold were enough for Xianxia to upgrade his profound spirit furnace, sword sheath, and all the flying sword by at least 2 grades at the same time. How could this be called being poor and dejected for a lifetime? Xianxia was completely speechless. From the beginning of the feeling that his own things could not be cheaply given to others, to the change after seeing the best quality spirit stones, and to the current completely speechless emotion, Xianxia suddenly felt that he was a fool in his previous life. Putting away such a big box of cyan crystal profound gold, Xianxia suddenly had a thought in his heart. If he still kept this box and let some people who knew the goods see this box, what kind of expression would they have? Would they scold him for wasting natural resources, or would they want to pull out a sword and kill him? That would be interesting. Putting away the box, he was about to leave. Xianxia suddenly turned his head back and looked down at the big pit that was dug. The box that contained the spirit stones was made of cyan crystal profound gold. Then what was the broken wooden box that contained the cyan crystal profound gold box outside? Was it really a broken wooden board? Reaching out and taking out the wooden box, Xianxia began to observe it carefully. The broken wooden box looked like a piece of rotten wood, and he could not see the slightest surprise, but Xianxia did not give up. His powerful spiritual awareness wrapped the wooden box, and bit by bit, he began to explore from every most subtle angle. Finally, the peak Jedon realm divine awareness noticed that in a corner of the box, there was a little bit of strange spiritual power overflowing. Xianxia keenly grasped this abnormality and began to analyze it carefully. This was a camouflage, but it was not easy to break. The huge memories of his previous life emerged in Xianxia's mind bit by bit. Finally, after almost a day and a night of experimentation, Xianxia found a way to break this camouflage. After nearly 2 days, Xianxia used the yin-yang reverse 5-element spirit power to wear down this camouflage from the eye of the formation bit by bit, revealing the true appearance of the wooden box. The verdant wood was like the wood that had just been cut from the tree. The wooden box was stacked with branches that were uniform in thickness and without any bending. Suddenly, there was a thriving smell, as if it could grow into a towering tree as long as it was buried in the soil. Penglai divine wood. The old mountain god actually made a wooden box with the branches of Penglai divine wood. Originally, Xianxia felt that it was a waste to take the cyan crystal profound gold box. Now he discovered that compared with this Penglai divine wood box, the cyan crystal profound gold box was simply the work of a miser. What was a prodigal? This was called a real prodigal son. Xianxia took the millennium profound yang fruit as a fruit to eat. Compared to others, he was simply a beggar in ragged clothes. He could directly die of shame. In the future, if there was a civil servant of the heavenly court who said that he was poor and frustrated for half of his life, Xianxia would not believe it again. Now Xianxia understood that when the civil servants of the heavenly court said that they were poor, they were modest. If he wanted to take it seriously, he would be a real fool. Chapter 172. Xianxia, who had suffered a strong blow, had no strength to complain at this moment. He could only put this wealth, which was enough to make Wuxia feel ashamed, into the merit ring. Then he casually buried the big pit he dug, and then he identified the direction and went straight to Chunyang Palace. It was not until 2 days later that Xianxia completely woke up from the shock. There was no way, although Xianxia was also a great principal golden immortal in his previous life, he had seen many high-level things, but he had seen it before, it was his first time. Penglai divine wood, as long as there was a finger thickness, it could be made into a super strong wood flying sword. Even if there was no array engraving, as long as it was a normal sacrificial refining, It was born to be a high-grade flying sword. If the sacrificial refining method was proper, and the cultivation method was matched, it could be directly upgraded to the best grade, even the king grade, the emperor grade, until the saint grade. The immortal grade was not a big problem. In his previous life, the profound spirit furnace was calculated according to the grade, which was a higher grade than the immortal grade. The preciousness of the Penglai divine wood could be seen. It was only the Penglai divine wood with the thickness of a finger. Now the box was made up of all the branches of the divine wood with the thickness of a wrist. Since it was called divine wood, of course, there was a reason. The Penglai divine wood was a natural wood divine object. Something that could be named with the word God. One did not need to ask to know what kind of goods it was. Xianxia was just strange. Since there was such a good thing, why didn't the old mountain god use it to sacrificial refine a magic weapon, but he left it in the mortal world to benefit himself? After thinking about it, Xianxia could only make a few guesses. Either the old mountain god did not know that this box was the Penglai divine wood, or he was afraid that he would be in trouble because of his wealth. After ascending, he was coveted, so he simply buried it here and let it never see the light of day. As for why he gave it to him, firstly, he had said that he would get rid of some fellows from the heavenly court. Secondly, the old mountain god didn't think that he would be able to recognize the treasure. Or he would bring trouble to someone else. While he obtained the precious treasure, he would also live in fear and not have a good ending. After all, he was the executioner of the heavenly court. He was also the same as the treacherous guy that the old mountain god had mentioned. Thus, he did not feel any psychological burden when he framed him. However, Xianxia deduced that it was most likely that the old mountain god himself didn't know about it and treated it as an ordinary box. If it was Xianxia, he would have risked his life to refine it, even if he knew that he would get into trouble because of his wealth. The more strength he had, the more status he would have after ascending. This was the most likely inference. In any case, this thing now belonged to him. Xianxia certainly would not use the Penglai divine wood to make a box. The cyan crystal profound gold was not yet capable of refining. Xianxia could ignore it, but Xianxia did not want to waste the Penglai divine wood. Looking at the appearance of the divine wood box, it should be dozens of branches. Xianxia carefully opened the box. Fortunately, it was only bound with a tough vine, and the branches of the divine wood were not damaged at all. Refining, Xianxia did not have such a cultivation base, but planting was not a big problem. The pure bottle medicine garden was now the best choice. There were already a large number of medicinal materials planted in it, and in the immortal fallen abyss, the pure bottle had absorbed full of spiritual power, which was just right for planting. At the beginning of the refining of the medicine garden, it was pure water attribute, but after adding the land and planting medicinal materials, it had a little earth and wood attributes. If you count the guardian hall of the bottle cap, plus the simulated sun, the metal and fire attributes were also considered to be on the edge. The 5 elements were gathered. However, although the 5 elements were gathered, it was not complete and the water attribute was dominant, including the spiritual power collected and absorbed was of the water attribute, making people feel that this was a magic weapon of the water attribute. After carefully inserting the branches of these Penglai divine wood into an open space in the medicine garden, Xianxia began to control the spiritual power of the medicine garden, crazily moisturizing and conditioning the branches of the Penglai divine wood. As Xianxia expected, almost at the beginning, the spiritual power absorbed by the fine medicine garden was like pouring into the dozens of branches of the Penglai divine wood. The branches of the Penglai divine wood were like a bottomless pit that swallowed spiritual power. No matter how much spiritual power was input, it was completely absorbed and not even a little overflowed. And from the beginning of Xianxia's input of spiritual power, it was no longer under Xianxia's control. It was as if the spiritual power absorbed in the pure bottle medicine garden had been completely controlled by the Penglai divine wood, madly absorbed without scruples. As long as there was a blue water stain on the pure bottle, it could supply the spiritual power of the entire medicine garden for several years. But at this moment, the originally slow blue spiritual power line was like a sponge that absorbed water, and it began to fall wildly. Just dozens of Penglai divine wood, just nourishing and conditioning the vitality of the Penglai divine wood, were consumed so quickly, so much that it was shocking. Yang Chen had not been stingy to take out the best spirit stone that he had just obtained. As long as he saw the situation of insufficient spiritual power, he would immediately use these best spirit stones to supplement. Compared with the Penglai divine wood and the pure bottle medicine garden, these spirit stones were completely expendable spiritual power and were not worth wasting at all. Fortunately, such a situation did not happen. When the spiritual power of the pure bottle was consumed by 3/4, when Yang Chen was waiting to absorb some more and exceeded the warning line, Yang Chen would use these best spirit stones. The spiritual power absorption of the Penglai divine would quickly slow down. Seeing this scene, Yang Chen was overjoyed. His figure flashed and rushed directly into the medicine garden. What he saw was a scene that made Yang Chen almost happy to laugh. Dozens of branches of the Penglai divine wood inserted on the ground had all grown green tender leaves. Needless to say, there must be roots below, firmly rooted in the ground. The branches, which were originally only as thick as a wrist, were also a lot thicker, almost as thick as a person's calf. The most important thing was that these Penglai divine woods were no longer branches, but trunks. The branches, which were almost 4 feet long, also grew a lot taller and became a length of 10 feet. The branches were completely straight, and the tender leaves were all concentrated at the top, and a tender branch was stretched out. These dozens of Penglai divine woods all survived and grew into a small forest of Penglai divine wood. It was worthy of being a wood attribute divine object. It had just undergone these changes, and the medicine garden began to be filled with a strong first wood aura. The aura of Yang Chen's previous nourishment of the thunder pomegranate seed was completely negligible before this first wood aura. The first wood aura was getting stronger and stronger, and in the end, even the entire medicine garden had undergone tremendous changes. In the rumbling sound, the entire medicine garden seemed to be turned upside down and began to shake violently. Chapter 173. All the wood-attributed plant herbs in the medicine garden, whether it was the first wood attribute or the second wood attribute, almost at the same moment, seemed to be catalyzed and grew wildly. In just a short moment, it was almost denser than growing in the medicine garden for 100 years. The space of the medicine garden, in this violent shock, seemed to be slowly but quickly and orderly expanding. Originally, it was only about 100 acres of space. After such a short time, it directly expanded more than twice. Around those medicine fields, there were countless empty spaces, and a small stream could be seen vaguely, not knowing where it came from, converging in the middle of the medicine field, and then flowing to the other end. Where the water came from and where it flowed, it was not known, but it had become running water. Such a change made Yang Chen unexpected. Although he knew that the medicine garden was an unfinished medicine garden, and that it could be improved after further refining, he did not expect that planting a piece of Penglai divine wood would achieve such an effect. It was definitely an unexpected surprise. The first wood attribute was surprisingly strong. The tall trees that originally nourished the thunder pomegranate were directly ignored by Yang Chen, and the thunder pomegranate was placed on the side of the Penglai divine wood. With the nourishment of the first wood of the Penglai divine wood, he believed that the effect could be several times better. What surprised Yang Chen even more was that in the changes of the medicine garden just now, almost all the medicines had increased by 100 years. Putting aside some of the thousands of years of medicinal herbs that were in the previous medicine garden, just some of the less precious ordinary medicinal herbs that Yang Chen had collected in the market a few years ago had directly become 100 years old, which was really surprising. However, such a change was not without a price. The original pure bottle that absorbed the full spiritual power could at least maintain the spiritual power of the medicine garden for at least 500 years, but after the absorption of the Penglai divine wood and the changes of the medicine garden, at least 80% of the spiritual power was gone. It was not easy to find a place like the spiritual vein of the immortal falling abyss where the spiritual power could be absorbed as much as possible. But despite this, Yang Chen was still very happy. If the spiritual power was insufficient, it was not a big deal to use those top-quality spirit stones, but it could make the medicine garden more perfect. This was something that could not be sought. It seemed that in the future, it was necessary to find some divine objects of various attributes to supplement the medicine garden, so that the medicine garden could become more perfect. In short, his sudden visit to the old mountain god's place was the biggest source of these pleasant surprises. After Xianxia finished all this, he immediately went through all the news he got in the immortal beheading stage in his mind again. After making sure that he didn't forget anything, he looked forward to it excitedly. After he visited all of these, he didn't know how many surprises it would bring him. The little episode on the road made Xianxia feel a lot better, and the depression of being assassinated was reduced a lot. The speed of returning to the Pure Yang Palace also seemed to be a lot faster. 3 days later, Xianxia arrived at the foot of the Meiqing Mountain. In less than half a day, Xianxia returned to the Nine Earth Villa. The disciple of Nine Mountain Manor was no longer Chu Heng, and was replaced by. It was Nine Mountain. Nine Earth. When he saw Xianxia, he congratulated him with a few words, with an expression of admiration. Even when Xianxia proposed to bring his servants into the Chunyang Palace, he generously nodded. Speaking of which, Xianxia's trip to the Nine Earth Mountain Manor was also to bring his 4 servants. Among the 4, Shunda had already cultivated from the 4th layer of qi, refining to the 7th layer in the 7 years that Xianxia wasn't here. On average, it took more than 2 years to advance by 1 layer. It could be said that his aptitude wasn't too bad, but because of his previous teachings, he wasted a lot of time and even ended up as a servant. He Lian, Yuan Ting, and Gu Kun were a little weaker, but they had already reached the 6th layer of qi refining, especially He Lian. Under Xianxia's previous teachings, her technique of controlling fire had reached perfection. Although it was still not as good as Xianxia's in the past, it was still quite good. Moreover, she was already very skilled in refining qi-nourishing pills and was trying to refine qi-seeking pills and foundation-building pills. These 4 servants, Xianxia had already gotten used to using them. Since the 4 of them were beaten by Xianxia, they no longer had any disloyalty and served him very wholeheartedly. The inner sect disciples were also allowed to have their own servants, so Xianxia naturally still liked to use these old people. In the depths of Meiqing Mountain, there was a huge palace complex surrounded by thousands of scattered small courtyards. This was where the real Chunyang Palace was located, and it was also the place where all the inner sect disciples could enter. The training disciples of Jiurang Mountain Villa had already informed Chunyang Palace. When Xianxia brought the 4 of them to the gate that symbolized the inner sect of Chunyang Palace, the first thing they saw was the 4 people standing under the gate waiting for them. 3 men and 1 woman, Du Qian, Shengguan Feng, Wang Yuan, and Gong Sunling. One of them was the first inner sect disciple that Xianxia had befriended, and the other 2 were the original managers of Yeshio Manor. They had all succeeded in foundation building because of Xianxia. Gong Sunling and Xianxia had interacted at the stairway gathering. The 4 of them all had smiles on their faces at the moment, waiting for Xianxia's arrival. Junior brother Yang, congratulations. Du Qian was the first to speak and directly called him junior brother. As long as one entered the inner sect, he would strictly follow the rules of seniority between master and disciple. Du Qian and Xianxia were theoretically disciples of the same generation. Similarly, Shengguan Feng, Wang Yuan, and Gong Sunling had also entered the sect in the past 10 years, so they were also fellow disciples. In 10 years, from the entry to foundation building, junior brother Yang, a genius is nothing more than this. Du Qian came up with a sentence, but immediately glanced at Gong Sunling, who was smiling on the other side, and hurriedly added, in the past 100 years, only junior brother Yang and junior sister Gong Sun have both reached foundation building within 10 years. Our Chunyang Palace is hopeful to prosper. Senior brother, you flatter me. Xianxia was very polite and saluted the 4 people. Not for anything else, but for them to be here to welcome him into the sect. Junior brother's name has spread all over the major sects. There is no such thing as flattering. Du Qian laughed and patted Xianxia's shoulder directly, and said impolitely, in the future, if I need any medicinal pills, I will ask you for help. You can't refuse. When Xianxia heard this, he immediately knew why Du Qian said this. It seemed that the news that he had participated in Wu Xiong's refining of the heaven-seizing pill had spread in the past few months, otherwise Du Qian would never say this. Before Du Qian's words landed, Gong Xuanling's voice had already followed up impolitely, "Junior brother Yang, you did not wait for me at immortal falling abyss. In the future, you have to take all my medicinal pills." Chapter 174. No problem, senior sister. Yang Chen replied with a smile and then cupped his hands at Gong Sunling. Congratulations, senior sister. Gong Sunling reached foundation establishment a few years earlier than Yang Chen. In the second year after Yang Chen entered the immortal fallen abyss, she had already reached foundation establishment. She was also considered to have a strong foundation in the qi refining stage. At the time of the gathering of the heavenly ladder, Gong Sunling was still at the level of the 6th layer of the qi refining stage, but after the gathering of the heavenly ladder, within a short period of 2 years, she broke through all the way and entered the foundation stage. This was originally the cultivation path of Gong Sunling from Yang Chen's previous life. At this moment, it coincided with Yang Chen's memory. However, Yang Chen knew that all the tragedies in the future would not happen. With Yang Chen around, he would never allow those things to happen in the past. Originally, Yang Chen said that he would wait for Gong Sunling in the immortal fallen abyss, but now he came out 3 years ahead of schedule. Gong Sunling naturally got the pill she needed. Sheng Guanfeng has been in the inner sect for 10 years. Wang Yuan also entered the inner sect at the same time as Gong Sunling. For the time being, they were still in the early stage of the foundation stage, and they were still in the stage of laying the foundation. After this stage, they would also go out to experience. Both of them were very happy to be able to wait for Yang Chen when Yang Chen entered the sect. A lot of things did not need to be said so clearly, as long as everyone knew it in their hearts. Now, the 4 of them were purely out of friendship or brotherhood. The reason why Yang Chen wanted to return to Chunyang Palace after his rebirth was not only because of his master, but also because of these fellow disciples. Although there were still a few fellow disciples that he had not met yet, he believed that there would be countless opportunities in the future. The 4 of them led Yang Chen and his 4 servants directly into the gate and walked toward a hall in Chunyang Palace. That hall was not the most majestic, but it was directly opposite the gate. It appeared very dignified. Above the gate hung a horizontal board, and on it were written the words, Cheng En Hall, in flamboyant calligraphy. Yang Chen knew that this Cheng En Hall was where Chunyang Palace accepted disciples as their master. It was very normal for him to come here as soon as he arrived. Seeing Cheng En Hall from afar, Yang Chen's heart could not help but beat faster. Thinking that his master should be waiting for him in Cheng En Hall, Yang Chen suddenly had a feeling of homesickness. Before arriving at Cheng En Hall, Yang Chen saw 2 acquaintances sitting on the side and seemed to be waiting for him. Among the 2 people sitting together, one was Zhu Chintao, the head of the medicine hall, and the other was Su Qingxin, the head of the foreign affairs hall of Chunyang Palace. The 2 Jidon stage masters were smiling and looking at the direction where Yang Chen came in. Both of them were Jidon stage masters, and nominally, they were now Yang Chen's martial uncles, so naturally, they would not go to the gate to greet him. However, being able to wait for Yang Chen in the mountain gate was already giving Yang Chen a lot of face. Du Qian and the others hurriedly bowed down without thinking and called him martial uncle. Yang Chen did the same. As for the 4 servants behind Yang Chen, they all called him martial uncle. Although they were servants, they were also disciples of Chunyang Palace. Good boy, I haven't seen you for a few years, and you have done such a big thing. Zhu Chintao and Yang Chen were relatively familiar with each other. After they finished bowing, he stood up and directly picked up Yang Chen from the ground. He laughed, patted Yang Chen's shoulder repeatedly, and praised him loudly. Martial uncle, you flatter me. Yang Chen could only smile and say carefully, What's wrong? Even I have only heard of the heaven-seizing pill. I don't even dare to think about it, but you directly refined it. Haha, in the future, let's see who dares to say that there is no alchemist in Chunyang Palace. The smile on Zhu Chintao's face had never stopped. He patted Yang Chen's shoulder with one hand and almost did not stop. In the past few months, I don't know how many people have come to Chunyang Palace to ask for advice. Haha, you have made great contributions to Chunyang Palace. It seemed that the reputation of Chunyang Palace had risen greatly in the past few months. Otherwise, Elder Su Qingxin's face would not be so red and radiant. The result of many people coming to ask for advice was that the status of Su Qingxin, the head of the Foreign Affairs Hall, had risen. He was more proud than ever before, indicating that he was also very satisfied with Yang Qin. Because of you, the number of Outer Mountain disciples who came to Chunyang Palace to be apprenticed has directly increased by more than 10 times this year. Even Yeshio Villa is almost unable to accommodate them. Su Qingxin's smile was not much less than Zhu Qintao's, and his eyes almost narrowed into a line. In this, you have made great contributions. I have reported to the palace master, and you will be rewarded according to your contributions. Martial nephew, you are just lucky. Zhu Qintao could say so, Su Qingxin could say so, but Yang Qin could not take the credit without scruples, so he just said it modestly. Lucky? Zhu Qintao was startled, and then immediately laughed heartily. Of course you are lucky. Otherwise, why did Elder Wu not look for me but you? Why didn't you go to Immortal Falling Abyss later or earlier? You went when Elder Wu was about to refine the heaven-seizing pill, and you happened to be chosen by Elder Wu. This is your opportunity, and others can't snatch it even if they want to. Zhu Qintao's words were always straightforward, and Yang Qin just listened with a smile, but did not say much. Zhu Qintao laughed for a while, turned his head to look at Qing and Hall over there, and suddenly turned his head to ask Yang Qin very seriously, Yang Qin, become an apprentice of this old man. This old man will let you be a personal disciple, how about it? It had to be said that Yang Qin's success in refining the heaven-seizing pill made Zhu Qintao want to accept him as a disciple. However, last time at 9 Earth Mountain Villa, he had mentioned it to Yang Qin once, and Yang Qin rejected it because it was against the rules. Zhu Qintao seemed to understand something, but he still wanted to fight for it again. There was no other way. An alchemy genius who could refine the heaven-seizing pill when he had just reached the foundation establishment stage was too enviable. Thank you, Uncle Master, for your kindness. Yang Qin still did not change his mind. What a joke. When Taishang Laojun said he wanted to accept Yang Qin as his last disciple, Yang Qin did not agree. How could he change his mind after Zhu Qintao's words? Uncle Master, even after I become an apprentice, I will still be a disciple of Chunyang Palace, and I will still come to you from time to time to ask for advice. It seemed that he did not answer Zhu Qintao's words, but everyone understood that this was Yang Qin's tactful refusal. Zhu Qintao shook his head and sighed. He looked at Qing and Hall again, and gently patted Yang Qin's shoulder. Go! Under everyone's gaze, Yang Qin walked towards Qing and Hall. This road was surprisingly dignified, and even Yang Qin had a feeling that he was about to tremble with excitement. His master was waiting for him inside. When he thought of this, Yang Qin had a kind of eagerness, but also uneasiness, for fear that the one who appeared was not his master. Step by step, he walked to the door of Qing En Hall. Looking inside from the outside, it was dark, and Yang Qin would not use his divine sense to explore. Standing at the door, Yang Qin's breathing quickened, and he could hear the sound of his heart pounding in his ears. His footsteps had just stopped for a few breaths when he heard a familiar voice from inside. What are you still standing there for? Come in. Just hearing this voice that haunted his dreams, Yang Qin's eyes couldn't help but turn red, but his heart was so happy that it almost exploded. Chapter 175. What are you still doing? Come in. In his previous life, when Yang Qin was at the door of Qing En Hall, because of his excitement, he also stopped at the door and heard this command. At the moment when he heard this, Yang Qin didn't even know whether he was in his previous life or this life. Yes. Holding back his excitement, Yang Qin lifted his legs over the high threshold and entered Qing En Hall. His eyes quickly adapted to the darkness in the hall, and he also saw the owner of the voice. A beautiful face, a tall figure, a familiar face and voice, with a look of appreciation and expectation in her eyes, looking at him with such a sweet smile. This scene, Yang Chen had been looking forward to it for 10 years after his rebirth. Yang Chen, you have the fire attribute of the 5 elements, which is just right for my fierce Yang Hall. Gao Yu's clear and familiar voice sounded in Yang Chen's ear. It's just that I am very curious, why don't you become a disciple of Hall Master Zhu? With your qualifications, it is not impossible to become a senior alchemist. Disciple entering fierce Yang Hall does not hinder my disciple from becoming an alchemist. Yang Chen resisted the excitement, his strong will pressed his lips that were about to tremble, and he tried to say this in a plain tone. However, after saying it, he was still a little short of breath. Although your qualifications are ordinary, your understanding is very high. With the miracle of reaching the top of the heaven ladder, it is not impossible for you to become a disciple of the Hall Master. Why must you worship me as a master? Gao Yu's doubts were not solved by a sentence from Yang Chen, but she asked more. At this time, Gao Yu had not yet become the Hall Master of Fierce Yang Hall, and in terms of strength ranking, she could be regarded as the worst Jiedan stage master in the Fierce Yang Hall. After all, Gao Yu had just condensed her Dan for less than 5 years. In these 5 years, it was only to let her consolidate her current realm. It was impossible to compete with those veteran Jiedan stage masters. What puzzled Gao Yu was also here. One of the rewards given by the palace master of Chunyang Palace to Yang Chen for climbing the heavenly ladder was that he could choose anyone who was qualified to be Yang Chen's teacher. Yang Chen chose to worship her as his teacher according to this reward. This surprised not only Gao Yu, but also many other people in Chunyang Palace. Could it be that acknowledging a powerful master was not better than acknowledging a Jindan stage grandmaster who just had the qualifications to accept disciples? Disciples' intuition tells me that you are the most suitable person to be disciples' master. On this issue, it was impossible for Yang Chen to tell everything. He could only use such a lame reason to deal with Gao Yu's doubts. Before this, the disciples' intuition has never been wrong. The heavenly ladder is like this, and the refining of the heaven-seizing pill at the last moment is also like this. This reason may not be very convincing, but with Yang Chen's final explanation, it was hard not to believe. Yang Chen had proved how correct his intuition was with powerful facts. Even if others wanted to refute it, there was no stronger example to refute it. Gao Yu stared at Yang Chen carefully for a while. She could even feel the trembling of Yang Chen's forcible suppression. However, Gao Yu did not think it was strange. She had seen several disciples in the foundation stage before, and almost everyone would show the natural fear of the Jiedan stage master. Especially under her gaze, it was inevitable that he would tremble. Maybe. Gao Yu soon left the doubts behind. She just had the qualification to accept disciples. Gao Yu was very cautious about her first disciple, but now it seemed that she was also very satisfied. This disciple was also a genius and popular. In Chunyang Palace and even in the entire world of cultivators, he was a well-known guy. I am Gao Yu of the Fierce Yang Hall. If you worship me, you will be a disciple of my Fierce Yang Hall. Gao Yu finally showed a smile on her face. It seemed that she was very happy to receive her first disciple. You are my first disciple, my first disciple. Hearing this, Yang Chen couldn't help it anymore. He quickly bowed down and kowtowed heavily. With a choked voice, he said loudly, "Disciple Yang Chen, greets master." At the moment when his forehead touched the ground, Yang Chen's tears couldn't stop bursting out. After thousands of years of longing, today he finally stood in front of his master again and heard the sweet voice of his master. Suddenly, Yang Chen felt that the suffering he suffered in the heavenly court in his previous life was nothing. If those could be exchanged for his master to stand in front of him, Yang Chen would rather endure another 10,000 years of pain. In his previous life, he was apprenticed 20 years later. At that time, Gao Yu already had the strength of the middle Jiedan stage. Unlike now, she had just consolidated the realm of Jiedan stage. It was not the turn of Yang Chen to become the first disciple, but in this life, Yang Chen became the first disciple of Gao Yu. Compared with the calm of Gao Yu before, Gao Yu, who had just reached the Jiedan stage, seemed to have a sense of novelty in accepting disciples, like a girl who had not grown up, simple and lovely. Yang Chen's crying appearance on the ground did not hide from Gao Yu's spiritual awareness. On the contrary, Gao Yu was quite disapproving of Yang Chen's performance. Isn't it just apprenticing? Is it necessary? In any case, he was his first disciple. How could he cry like a woman? What kind of propriety would that be? Come and worship the ancestor master, Gao Yu reminded Yang Chen with dissatisfaction. Apprenticing to a master, naturally he had to worship the ancestor master. This was the first time that Gao Yu had experienced it, and it seemed very fresh. Yes, master. Yang Chen hurriedly controlled his emotions and respectfully offered incense and kowtowed to the ancestor master of Chunyang Palace, and then once again visited Gao Yu. After serving tea, he finally became Gao Yu's disciple. For the first apprenticeship ceremony, Gao Yu was actually a little nervous. Even Zhu Chintao wanted to watch the ceremony, but was stopped by Gao Yu. In the Cheng-En Hall, only the master and apprentice were there. In the future, step up your cultivation. Sitting on the upper hand, looking at the respectful Yang Chen, Gao Yu seemed to find a little master's feeling. She pretended to be old and began to admonish, "We, master and apprentice, will make our branch the strongest in the fierce Yang Hall." Gao Yu must have seen many competitions within the sect, and there was such an unyielding spirit in her. She commanded Yang Chen, which was also her own goal. "Yes, master, as long as you want it." Yang Chen promised loudly again. He didn't know how many times he had repeated it in his heart, but he didn't say it out loud. "Master, I will not only make our branch the strongest in the fierce Yang Hall, but also let you ascend to the position of the fierce Yang Hall master. In the future, you will also sit on the throne of the palace master of Chunyang Palace." Chapter 176. As long as it's what I want? Gao Yu was a little surprised and stunned. In such a sentence, even if Gao Yu was stupid, she understood the meaning. "As long as it's what you want, master." Yang Chen replied affirmatively again, nodding heavily, the expression on his face. There was no sign of joking. "What if I want to keep my face forever?" Without thinking about it, Gao Yu made a request. "I know at least 3 kinds of methods to keep my face, and I also know 2 kinds of appearance pill recipes." With a slight smile, Yang Chen replied casually, "No matter what method you use, I can make you young forever." "What if I want the pill recipe of heaven-seizing pill?" Gao Yu looked at Yang Chen as if she was looking at a monster. She didn't know if what he said was true or false, but she immediately changed the topic and suddenly asked with a smile. The unique momentum of the Jedon stage master floated out faintly, waiting for Yang Chen's answer. "The main ingredient of heaven-seizing pill is the best green jade Ganoderma. It is best to grow the green jade Ganoderma under the nourishment of the chalcedony in the deepest part of the best jade mine. Other auxiliary medicinal materials need." Yang Chen said without hesitation, without a trace of hesitation. Yang Chen's move also made Gao Yu sluggish for a moment. After a moment, she immediately reached out and covered Yang Chen's mouth. "Stop, don't say it." Gao Yu couldn't imagine that she just asked tentatively. Yang Chen actually said the recipe of the heaven-seizing pill that the mortal cultivators dreamed of. "Why do you do this?" Gao Yu, who was a little moved, gently let go of the hand covering Yang Chen's mouth and asked with a frown. "Because you are my master." Yang Chen didn't have any time to think about it and blurted out directly. The warmth and smoothness of Gao Yu's palm made Yang Chen almost couldn't help but kiss it secretly, but in the end, there was no extra action. It's just that between the mouth and nose, there was still a delicate fragrance like orchid and musk lingering. Gao Yu was close to him. How could she not hear the firmness and sincerity in Yang Chen's words? She was slightly moved but also a little puzzled. However, since he had already acknowledged Zhang Xian as his master, there was still a long way to go in the future, so there was no rush. The simple apprenticeship ceremony didn't take too long, and there wasn't a single spectator present. When Yang Chen and Gao Yu walked out of Cheng-En Hall, Zhu Chintao and the others only waited for a little while. As for Yang Chen's choice, Zhu Chintao and the others had protested before. How could such a talented disciple casually find an incompetent master? Wouldn't that ruin Yang Chen's future? But after arriving at the hierarch of Chunyang Palace, everything was decided. When Yang Chen climbed to the top of the celestial ladder, there was a reward. He was allowed to choose any qualified person in Chunyang Palace to be his master. The lord of Chunyang Palace sat on the futon, did not lift his eyelids and slowly said, "This is the reward he deserves." But his understanding is excellent, and his will is tenacious. Such a genius, if he is handed over to Gao Yu, who has never taught a disciple, isn't it destroying him? Su Qingxin was very clear about how great Yang Chen's potential was. Not to mention anything else, just participating in the successful refining of the heaven-seizing pill and becoming the key to the success of it was enough to bring a senior alchemist to Chunyang Palace, and it could also bring a lot of benefits. If such a genius was really destroyed, it would be a real pity. Standing in front of the palace master, in addition to Su Qingxin and Zhu Chintao, there was Liang Xiaoming, the master of Bright Moon Hall, and Xiao Ming, the current master of Fierce Sun Hall. In addition to those Yuanying stage elders who were in seclusion, even the top management of Chunyang Palace were naturally very concerned about the cultivation of a genius disciple. Gao Yu is also a Jedan stage master, and she is qualified to accept disciples. With master's guidance, how can it destroy Yang Chen? The palace master still looked at ease, as if he was not talking about a genius disciple in his own sect, but an ordinary disciple. Palace master, what we mean is that it may be better if there is a master to guide him. Liang Xiaoming took over the conversation and said, seemingly to smooth things over, but no one knew what he was thinking. The palace master sat on his futon and did not even open his eyes. He just asked faintly, "In that case, let me ask you, before reaching the top of the heaven stairway, there is no need to say anything, just pretend that you don't know." After he reached the top of the heaven stairway, who taught him anything? Cultivation, alchemy, anything is there? At the same time, the palace master's divine sense seemed to stay on Liang Xiaoming for a while, and then quickly dissipated. This question made everyone speechless. There was a rift between the disciple Chu Heng and Yang Chen, and it seemed that everyone present knew. In this case, everyone knew what kind of life Yang Chen had in the past. Even in Yeshio Villa, Chu Heng did not let people enlighten Yang Chen. Later, everyone learned about this, but no one said much. At that time, a disciple in the Qi refining stage and a disciple in the foundation establishment stage, everyone still knew which one to choose. But now it was different. Yang Chen not only succeeded in the foundation establishment stage, but also successfully refined the heaven-seizing pill for Elder Wu Xiong. He had long become a hot spot among the alchemists. Liang Xiaoming was very embarrassed. Chu Heng was his disciple, everyone knew, and Chu Heng dared to suppress Yang Chen so blatantly, precisely because he had Liang Xiaoming as his master. Others were not good to compete with him. But now Yang Chen's performance seemed to be a slap in Liang Xiaoming's face. The disciple did not live up to expectations, and of course, the master was the one who lost face. Everyone was also speechless. They all knew about Yang Chen's experience. The reason why Yang Chen knew so much seemed to be attributed to Yang Chen's crazy reading in the scriptures Pavilion of Nine Earth Villa. Moreover, the contribution points for him to enter the scriptures pavilion to read were exchanged with his own medicinal pills. No one else really helped him. On the contrary, Yang Chen had been fighting for face and reputation for Chunyang Palace in the past few years. Strictly speaking, everyone felt a little ashamed. Since he can cultivate to this point by himself, what are you worried about? Are you afraid that Gao Yu can't teach him well? The palace master finally opened his eyes. After looking around, he closed them again. If you are really worried, then let me open the scriptures pavilion of Chunyang Palace for him, and let him see whatever he wants to see. The last reward was the foundation establishment pill. Since he doesn't need it, then change it to this. In this regard, no one had any objections. Yang Chen's apprenticeship was a foregone conclusion, and now Yang Chen and Gao Yu became master and apprentice. Yang Chen, since you have become an inner mountain disciple, you must abide by the rules of Chunyang Palace. You must not violate them. Zhu Chintao was very optimistic about Yang Chen, so he paid a lot of attention and care. Speaking of the sect rules, this disciple has something to report. Yang Chen remembered something at this time. He took off his Qiankuan bag from his waist, took out a compass from it, and then sent it to Du Qian with the Qiankuan bag. Chapter 177. Du Qian subconsciously took the Qiankuan bag and the compass. He didn't know what was going on. He looked at Yang Chen and asked doubtfully, This is my Qiankuan bag. Yang Chen pointed at the Qiankuan bag and then pointed at the compass. This is the compass that can find the location of my Qiankuan bag. There are still a few more of these compasses. As he said that, he took out the other compasses from the Qiankuan bag. A series of identical compasses were placed neatly on the ground, which made people feel that something big was about to happen. I was chased by many people in the immortal falling abyss. Yang Chen narrated what happened, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with himself. Each of them has such a compass in their hands. Du Qian's face turned ashen as he listened to Yang Chen's understatement. Zhu Chintao was also unusually serious. Gao Yu had never experienced this kind of thing before. At this moment, she frowned and rushed directly to the front of Yang Chen. Looking at these things, she said angrily, Who dares to touch my first disciple? As usual, she blocked in front of him. Yang Chen looked at Gao Yu's narrow back and couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth. If Yang Chen hadn't had this kind of personality in his previous life, the tragedy that followed wouldn't have happened. Seeing Gao Yu's angry appearance, Yang Chen swore again, In this life, I will hold up the sky for you. Master, let this disciple handle this kind of small matter. Yang Chen took a small step forward and stood next to Gao Yu. Although he was still half a body behind Gao Yu, he had already expressed his intentions clearly. Gao Yu glanced at Yang Chen and didn't say anything else. She just hummed in agreement with the dignity of a master. Yang Chen, come with me to the law enforcement hall. Du Qian took Yang Chen's Qiankuan bag and put away all the compasses. He directly invited Yang Chen. The Qiankuan bag and the 7 compasses were neatly placed in a row on a long wide table in the middle of the law enforcement hall lobby. Directly opposite was the hall master of the law enforcement hall, Yuanying ancestor Meng Xian. At this time, Meng Xian's face was also frosty, staring at these things in silence. There was a heart-palpitating silence on the scene. Du Qian stood on the side with his head down. It was hard to see his expression, but it was conceivable that he was not very happy. Yang Chen was a fellow disciple of his. Yang Chen was murdered in such a way, it would be strange if he could be happy. Similarly, the friends of Chen who came back with Du Qian would not be happy. Gao Yu, Zhu Chintao, and Su Qingxin didn't say anything. They directly slammed the table in the law enforcement hall and sat on the chair next to them, still angry. If the law enforcement hall didn't say something today, they would Ming Ling Tian. It was obvious that this was a purposeful conspiracy against Yang Chen. Meng Xian had already tested these compasses. They were only effective against Yang Chen's Qiankuan pouch. Other compasses were useless. It was clear that they were only targeting Yang Chen. There was an extremely well-hidden trace of refinement on the Cosmos sack. That place was a directional marker. These compasses had been refined after tracing that spot to find Yang Chen's whereabouts. And the refining method was obviously from the Chunyang Palace. For thousands of years, Chunyang Palace had not been so blatantly targeting the disciples of Chunyang Palace from the inside. Meng Xian could not help but be furious. Killing a fellow disciple, especially such a genius disciple, was simply cutting off the hope of the rise of Chunyang Palace. To be more serious, it was deceiving the master and destroying the ancestors. Such a huge matter was unprecedented. Naturally, he had to inform the palace master to make a decision. The flying sword sent by Meng Xian returned after a while. The palace master of Chunyang Palace followed the flying sword and stepped into the law enforcement hall. After entering the door without saying a word, he went directly to the long table in the middle, reached out and picked up the Qiankuan pouch, and began to explore it with his divine awareness. The other party's refinement was very secretive. The place where something was slightly added was just on the belt of the Qiankuan pouch. If he didn't know that there was this compass, he wouldn't care about that place at all. Yang Chen also found this place after he guessed that the other party had this kind of arrangement. This is the work of a Jindan master. The palace master quickly made a judgment and frowned as if he couldn't believe it. It's the method of water, the method of our Chunyang Palace. As the palace master of Chunyang Palace said so, the suspects had been delineated within the scope of several people. The palace master couldn't help but frown. A Jiedon stage master, placed in any sect, was the revitalization force of the sect. If a Jiedon stage master of the pure Yang Palace was lost because of this matter, the palace master would have to weigh it. According to reason, this kind of thing should not happen. How could a Jindan master deliberately deal with an outer sect disciple in the Qi refining stage? It should be known that Yang Chen's Qiankuan pouch was issued shortly after he entered Yeshio Villa, and it was the standard equipment issued after Yang Chen defeated Sun Haijing and had the treatment of the third layer of Qi refining stage. At that time, which Jindan master had such a great hatred with a boy from the countryside and had to use this means to plot against Yang Chen. This was really unreasonable. Who issued Yang Chen's Qiankuan pouch? The palace master suddenly asked. It was Chu Heng, the training disciple at that time, who received it from the inner sect and then handed it to Wang Yuan, the director of Yeshio Villa, who issued it to Yang Chen. Every magic weapon issued by the sect was recorded. Meng Xian had just checked it, so when the palace master asked, he immediately answered. Wang Yuan was in the law enforcement hall and had just followed him. Meng Xian had already asked him. Chu Heng. The palace master frowned again. Everyone knew the conflict between Yang Chen and Chu Heng. If there was anyone who was the most suspicious, it was Chu Heng. However, Chu Heng was only in the foundation establishment stage, and it was impossible for him to achieve such a level of refining, which meant that there was someone behind him. Bright Moon Temple Master Liang Xiaoming naturally became the other most suspicious candidate. He was Chu Heng's master and also had the cultivation of the peak Jindan realm. He was fully capable of refining the Qiankuan pouch. And the most consistent thing was that he was of the water attribute, which was completely in line with the palace master's judgment just now. Call Temple Master Liang over. After a while, the palace master secretly made a decision. He sat in the main seat of the law enforcement hall and gave an order to Meng Xian. Liang Xiaoming appeared in front of everyone in a while, but his face was full of confusion. He did not know why he had been called to the law enforcement hall. Temple Master Liang, you refined this Qiankuan pouch later on, right? The palace master did not beat around the bush and went straight to the point. Chapter 178. Liang Xiaoming walked to the table with a puzzled face, took the Qiankuan bag and looked at it. Then he immediately nodded and admitted, yes, I refined this Qiankuan bag later and added something that can be used for tracking. As soon as he said this, Gao Yu next to him was about to stand up and argue, but Yang Chen pulled her gently. Then he remembered that the palace master was present and restrained himself. Others stared at Liang Xiaoming with anger, but in the law enforcement hall, no one dared to lose their temper. Who did you refine this for? At this moment, the palace master of Chunyang Palace did not show any joy, anger, sorrow, or joy on his face. His tone was as usual, as if he was communicating in another place, without the seriousness in the law enforcement hall. It was my disciple Chu Heng who asked me to do it. He said that it was for a promising disciple. He was afraid that this disciple would have an accident when he went out. Especially with this, it made it easy for him to track. Liang Xiaoming was a little surprised. In fact, from the beginning, he felt that something was wrong. After answering this question, he asked doubtfully, is there something wrong with this Qiankuan bag? Look at those compasses again. The palace master did not say much. He just raised his head and motioned him to look at the compasses next to the Qiankuan bag. Liang Xiaoming turned around and picked up one of them. After exploring it with his divine awareness and spiritual qi, he immediately knew the use of the compass. After discovering its use, Liang Xiaoming frowned. Without hesitation, he checked it one by one. In the end, his face was full of anger. How could he be so stupid? Liang Xiaoming was not a fool. Of course, he knew what so many tracking compasses meant. He almost roared on the spot, Whose Qingkuan bag is this? It's mine, Martial Uncle Liang. Yang Chen stood aside and replied immediately. Liang Xiaoming looked up and saw Yang Chen. He was not very surprised. He stared at Yang Chen for a while and said, "Why did Chu Heng want to kill you?" "How do I know?" Yang Chen put on an innocent posture. "Ever since this disciple entered the sect, Brother Chu has not seen me as pleasing to the eye." This was a fact. Even if Yang Chen did not say it, everyone knew it. Could there be some misunderstanding here? No matter what, Chu Heng was still Liang Xiaoming's disciple. At a time like this, Liang Xiaoming had to speak up for Chu Heng. Perhaps Chu Heng accidentally lost the tracking formation and someone else picked it up. You should know that you've attracted a lot of jealousy during the Celestial Stairway Assembly. Although Chu Heng doesn't like you, he doesn't want to kill you, right? This was the most obvious excuse, but as the leader of the Bright Moon Hall of Chunyang Palace, he still had the right to defend Chu Heng in front of the palace master. Especially when he mentioned that he had accidentally lost the tracking formation, this explanation actually became reasonable. In any case, Chu Heng had left the sect to temper himself after the sect tournament, so it wasn't a big deal for him to lose some of his belongings. At most, he would gain a reputation for being careless, but he wouldn't be charged with any crime. This disciple was pursued by assassins twice outside the Nine Earth Mountain Villa. Once before entering the Nine Earth Mountain Villa, and once before the Heavenly Stairway Assembly. Yang Chen didn't argue with Liang Xiaoming at all. He only told him about his experience of being pursued. Before the Heavenly Stairway Assembly, there weren't many people who were jealous of me. Everyone understood what Yang Chen was saying. Moreover, the two incidents that he mentioned were the ones that the Law Enforcement Hall had sent out in full force to search for assassins. The scene at the time was very big, and Du Qian still remembered it clearly. It seemed like Yang Chen was explaining that his being pursued had nothing to do with him reaching the top of the Heavenly Stairway Assembly. However, it led everyone's thoughts back to the two previous pursuits. This made Chu Heng even more suspicious. That was done by the outer sect disciple, Sun Haijing. At that time, he personally admitted it. Liang Xiaoming's expression was ugly. His own disciple was going to be accused of harming his fellow disciples, so how could he let it go? This disciple only wants to know. Sun Haijing is a disciple at the 4th layer of Qi training. He's not a pill refiner, nor is he a craftsman. He's definitely not a wealthy person. How did he pay 4 7th layer Qi training experts and 1 8th layer Qi training expert? Or did he have a good relationship with those assassins? In his previous life, Liang Xiaoming was the mastermind behind Gao Yu's betrayal. How could Yang Chen let him go? Even if it wasn't Liang Xiaoming who did it, he still had to oppose him. Moreover, Chu Heng should have died a long time ago. How could Yang Chen let Liang Xiaoming get away with it? Almost every word he said was like a pearl. None of them could be explained. If Liang Xiaoming accidentally said something wrong, it would mean that Chu Heng was guilty. Perhaps Sun Haijing used flowery words to deceive Chu Heng's trust. Liang Xiaoming said these words without blushing. After all, Sun Haijing is also his proud disciple. It's normal for him to be deceived by him. In any case, Chu Heng would at most bear the crime of negligence. He would not admit to being the mastermind. Perhaps senior brother Chu didn't lose it by accident. Yang Chen didn't want to entangle himself in this issue and change the subject. Why don't Master Liang summon Senior Chu back and ask him? If senior brother Chu doesn't dare to come back, it means he fled. Confronting him is also a solution. Liang Xiaoming nodded. I'll send a paper crane to Chu Heng, but it might take half a year or a year. I don't know where he is now. Martial nephew Yang, did you get these compasses from the people who chased after you? Unfortunately, Martial nephew Yang's killing intent is too heavy. If you could leave a few alive, wouldn't we know? Yang Chen patted his head exaggeratedly and looked annoyed. If there were a few alive, the truth would come to light immediately. Catch the thief and get the stolen goods? Liang Xiaoming said indifferently. Since you want to say that Chu Heng did this, you must have evidence. I don't think these things alone are enough. As he said this, he looked at the Qiankuan bag and the compasses and shook his head. He directly turned his head to the palace lord and put on a posture of protecting his disciple. How can you be so partial to your disciple? Gao Yu slammed the table, stood up, and loudly rebuked. You want to protect your disciple, and I also want to protect my disciple. If you want to punish Chu Heng, show me ironclad evidence. Liang Xiaoming didn't care about Gao Yu at this time. He coldly snorted and immediately retorted, You want to touch my disciple with just one side of the story? No way. The cold-faced Liang Xiaoming didn't wait for him to turn his head. He suddenly looked at Yang Chen with astonishment. He didn't know where he had picked up a limp body from. At first glance, it was obvious that he had been restrained. Yang Chen threw him to the ground. Fortunately, I didn't kill them all at that time. Yang Chen had a rejoicing expression. This person chased after me. Palace Lord and Hall Leader Meng, please decide. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation, audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.